I was able to record the higher self in a meditative session. Since time doesn't just run in one direction, I was able to pick up on the signal and stitch two seemingly separate events together in order to record a full meditative session. Ladies and gentlemen, now streaming the higher self.
Good now, travelers. I hope your now is amazing. It's such a beautiful day, and I decided to go for a walk. So before I even realized I wanted to go for a walk, I was doing a meditation. My intention for the meditation was to be able to get clear, coherent communication from the higher self. And so this is what I guess this video will be talking about as we're on our walk. Reincarnating is never an easy thing because you are literally dealing with the two worlds. You're dealing with the world that you were just in, and then you're dealing with the world, well, I guess you're dealing with three worlds because you're dealing with the world that you were just in, you're dealing with the world that you have now come into, and then also the responsibility of creating a whole new reality. The main thing that I want to speak to is just about the fear and how afraid I was. I believe, oh my God, probably every other day I speak to that version of myself because I look back and it's like I can tap into the essence of how that version of me was feeling during those moments. How afraid she was to really believe in who she was and who she was becoming. This whole thing started with some technology that was given to us way back in, but during that time we felt like it would be a great idea to document it, because the documentation, especially if you can document something that can stand the test of time, it's able to jog your memory and help you tie some pieces together. During that time period, we understood the importance and the power of a mirror structure, which is what you would call a pyramid, and how if you enclose a soul in a pyramid, you're able to project your consciousness into a different reality. And at that point, our goal was to project our consciousness in order to make it to the future, but towards the west. And from our perspective then, there was nothing to kind of like know what that would look like. It was just what we would kind of try to envision within our mind's eye of what we would want it to look like. Fast forward to 2016, that is when the consciousness that was enclosed into that tomb, and I projected myself into a vessel which manifested into this physical realm known as the being that you guys call Goldie. That's the part that I want to speak to. I want to speak to the confusion that came along with that, the human. And when I say the human, I'm speaking of Goldie, and I'm speaking of the Goldie that exists during that time, not the Goldie of 10 that is before you right now. That's just a version of my entire essence. One of the very first messages that I projected onto her was that you're not going to work for anybody but me. She didn't know what that meant. That's where a lot of the fear came from, because that also includes your livelihood. You know, how are you going to take care of yourself? How are you going to support yourself? And even if you were to build a business, it doesn't just happen overnight. Now, keep in mind, when we first got into these chambers, we had no reference point of what it would look like. And that's why we brought riches into the tomb with us. All of the gold, all of the jewels, we brought those things in with us to serve as a reference point, because we had no reference point as to what this world would look like. So we didn't realize that a lot of these things now had to be built They had to be created. And the gold would only serve as, again, the reference point. So telling her that she could not work was very scary, and it was confusing. A lot of moments where, opportunities would be presented and she would want to take it, and I would be standing right beside her telling her, no, you can't do that. And even for the times where she did get into a job, it was very limited, very, very limited. She would only be there for a few months. I would give her a mission at a certain location, and sometimes missions are literally, they can entail you just putting your energy into a space, and that's it. And sometimes that can take an hour, sometimes it can take a few months, sometimes it could take a year. But we were trying to also reduce the timing in regards to that. So I would say she never went over a year or even met a year's mark once I got into the picture, because I didn't want to continue to waste more time. So every place that she went to served a purpose in order to kind of leave a signpost of her energy there to possibly bounce off of somebody else's energy, whatever the case may be. It was never that she was sent to these places to work just to earn money. It was for a reason. Even if the reason was because I want you to understand the vibrational frequency of the name of a company. That became a huge challenge, because the difference in when we were in Kemet is that the palaces, the assistants, everything that we needed was already there. In this realm, there is also a system in place that's designed to keep you from even realizing who you are, so you can focus on the goal frequency in order to make those things manifest. She bounced around like a light wave in order to try to find a place to live, find a way to support herself. There were so many times where I would just whisper to her and talk to her, and the fact that she could understand, that meant more than anything in the world. You don't understand how many have used this technology, and the human that we are projecting consciousness into, they would just dismiss what they're hearing. They would just dismiss what they're seeing, they're smelling, they're feeling. They would just dismiss it all and write it off as coincidence. She didn't want to do that. And I remember her saying she was scared to not listen. I wanted to make her reality so different, so synchronous, that she couldn't ignore certain things. And it worked. And so I guess you could call that, at that moment, she called it the fear of God. She was more afraid of what God might do to her for not listening, as opposed to the world crucifying her for listening. Included the directive of, you're not going to work. First day that we started really training her with the technology, getting her to understand how to communicate in order to see who she was, I told her to start writing. The very first day, it was June the 14th of 2016, and she pulled out her notebook and she started writing from that moment. And all of those experiences became the first release of I'm Not Crazy, I'm Conscious. Now it's 2025, and there has been 4 books published since that time. And just the growth of alone is what I'm specifically proud of. I'm very proud of the fact that my consciousness tapped into a technology that people in the future would find to be so foreign. But I was able to project that energy into now, and now thrive into a human vessel that completely was open for the experience. that was designed just for this moment and now. You can't argue with that. You all can do it. And that's why it's very important to know that self. You are more than just a mother. You are more than just a father. You are more than just a worker. You are more than just a human. You are very powerful. And if you weren't, you wouldn't even be here. The way to turn this on is just to trust those nudges that you're feeling. It might not make sense. Like I said, she was completely petrified when I told her to quit her job. I literally said, you got to quit your job. And she laughed. And she's like, why would I do that? At the same time, I also told her to leave her family. I told her to move. I told her to get rid of everything that she once knew. And she did it. And I'm not saying that that's the same steps that you would take, because that's based on the consciousness that's being projected to you, what your steps might look like. But just the amount of trust that's needed, that's very important. Now we're here in 2025, and things look extremely different from how they looked in 2016. That blockage of fear is gone. And I'm not saying that there aren't moments where the human can get fearful, because there are. This shit is new. And a lot of times the human is holding on for dear life. You just have to trust that we didn't come this far for no reason at all. I didn't come this far to scare you. I didn't come this far to harm you. You have to trust that. So even if it doesn't look like what you want it to look like, or what you think it should look like, trust the nudges that you're receiving. We work really hard to set up synchronizations so you can read the realm and not really focus on what someone else is giving to you. And I hope you all are still able to hear me, because the wind is blowing really hard. Just so you know, that is just the presence of more beings around me. That's why the wind is blowing. Everybody got something to say. But the main purpose of this is just for you to come out of fear. Trust what you're seeing. Trust what you're hearing. You may have had experiences as a child that you have dismissed, things that you saw, things that you observed. You might have dismissed it completely now that you're an adult, because you're like, oh, I was just a child. No, all of that really happened. My human actually saw self projecting into a simulation. She would see it when she was a child. She would close her eyes, and it looked like she would be on a grid, and you know, it would almost be like a woofer effect, where it would just be like, woo, 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 woo. She would get closer, and then further away, and then closer, and then further away, and then closer, and further away. She hated that. She hated it so much, because it was like a mind fuck. Like, what is this? But that was the consciousness trying to come through. I'm thankful for my human. I'm so thankful. My life might not look like what everybody else's life looks like. There are so many people that have said, why don't you just get a job? Just get a job. She's not going to get a job until there is a reason for it. It's part of the mission to do it, but in order to appease somebody else, it's not going to happen. I have set up so many things. It's almost like you pulling back a slingshot, and you know, the further back you pull it, the more momentum it's going to build up. In those spaces and places of confusion and fear, and she still followed through. That was us pulling back the slingshot. There is so much momentum that has been built up that will propel her. She will have one situation where funds are depleted, and that will initiate another source of income. It'll never end. When you look back on this video and you hear these words, I want you to know who they are coming from. The attend, praises and honoring. I'm very thankful for you. Praising and honoring to your commitment of giving life to us all, each version of us. As we walked out of the door you created, we shine while still being tethered to your heart and every part of you. I lift up my head to you. My arms are raised to symbolize the unity of your life-giving force. My eyes are open to you. My ears and nose receive you. Allow this moment and now to penetrate throughout all moments and now. Reach my heart and disperse your bounty upon this land. I am thankful. I am yours. Sealed with the circle of our bloodline, I offer my tolerance to you.